Wonderful. Wonderful.
What did you do that's so wonderful now?
You got tickets for our show.
Yeah, we'll go for it first week.
That's wonderful. It's a cute show, and it's followed by, I'm going to announce it again, but it's followed by it's an hour-long opera, and then it's followed by 45 minutes of Broadway show tunes. So it's going to be very nice. Rosa, do you have another? This one isn't very good. Oh, wait. Maybe it was just that. Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was just the side. That wasn't good. I couldn't get to the tickets. I printed off where it said. Great.
I couldn't print out the tickets, so I hope your website's okay.
Yes. Perfect. There's a lot of info here, and so I. Good morning. So we're going to go to Portugal today, but I did ask you a question at the end of last week, which was to consider, we were talking about ethnicities, what's more important, and I asked you to consider whether, if you were asked, would you say you were an American Jew or a Jewish American? We were talking, remember, about Napoleon and giving up peoplehood in order to get citizenship. And for those Jews in France, they would say they were what? They were Jewish French men and women, right? You can say French Jews. You can say I'm an American Jew. But where is the emphasis in that statement? I'm an American Jew. So the emphasis is on Jew. I'm a Jew who happens to live in America. I'm an American Jew. Of course. Where you're a Jew who lives in America. That's what an American Jew is, right? Okay, so you say for you, that emphasizes America. It emphasizes America as the place where you live, as opposed to a Dutch Jew, a German Jew, a Norwegian Jew, an Israeli Jew, right? Because it puts the emphasis on the place you live. Yes. Now, if you say you're a Jewish American, so then you identify first as an American who happens to practice Judaism. I'm a Jewish American. It sounds a little strange to us because we don't normally say that. We would say, well, I'm an American Jew, right? Wait a minute, you gotta, Susie already just put her head up.
It's when you say Jewish American, you put your Jewish identity first. And when you say American Jew, you put your American identity first. That's basically what it is.
I think it's the opposite, but that's okay.
That's backwards, because an American Jew means you're a Jew, and you're qualifying it by saying American Jew.
Correct. That's my opinion as well. If I'm a Jewish American, it means I am an American who happens to practice Judaism. And so the only reason I brought it up last week is for us to kind of think about how do we identify ourselves? What is the more weighty aspect for you? Is it being an American or is it being a Jew? Okay. And
Identify with both very strongly.
you could identify with both very strongly, but generally speaking, you will have one identification that is stronger than the other. And neither one is correct or incorrect. This is not a judgment. This is nothing like that. It's just I never thought about that before. If I were asked, what is my strongest identity? Okay, it was just a question to get you thinking a little bit and considering your Jewishness. As I said, there's no right or wrong answer, and I'm certain I am in no position to judge anybody about anything. I have to worry about myself first and make sure that my business is on the level and ethical and clean. Yes. How do I identify? Good question. Although I'm a rabbi, I would say I'm an American Jew. But that's just me. That's just me. It's other. I'm just speaking for myself, but okay. Yes. Before World War II.
Before World War II, the Jews in Germany were first German. After World War II, they became Jews. Hungary, the same thing. I am a Jew.
Remember, that's one of the things we were talking about last week was Kristallnacht, and that's how this conversation came up. Because German Jews identified themselves as primarily German who happened to practice Judaism. Their allegiance was to Germany first and to the religion second. That's how the question came up, actually. So thank you. Very quickly, before we begin, I want to remind everyone, if anyone is interested, my opera company is performing this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. It's Gianni Schicchi, which is a comic Puccini opera in English. Where at VBI. Yes. Followed by 45 minutes of Broadway show tunes. Tickets are $25. You can get them at the door. That's this Sunday at 2 p.m. Oh, at my synagogue, Valley Beth Israel. Okay, so let's talk about the Jews of Portugal. And obviously, we know Portugal exists on the far western coast of Europe, right? And next to it is Spain. And above it is a little above it, and all to the west is Spain, yes. So Jews existed in the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is Spain and Portugal. Before Portugal even became a separate kingdom. And there is documentation that starting in 482 CE, with the fall of the Roman Empire, there were Jews living in Portugal. The Roman Empire falls in 476. Does anyone know who conquers the Roman Empire? Mm-hmm. Good job, Rosalie. The Goths, the Germanic tribe, the Goths, end the Roman Empire in 476. And there is persecution of the Jews to some degree after the fall of the Roman Empire. And in 711, that should be, anybody, does that ring a bell for anyone?
Fast food store.
Haha, fast food store, yes. But the date, 711. And once again, ding, 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 ding. Good star, good job. Gold star for Rosalie. The Moors conquer Spain in 711. So we can remember that, right? 7-Eleven, the grocery store, the Moors conquer Spain. Okay. You'll always make that association now when you see 7-Eleven. And yes, the year 711. The Moors conquer Spain. They invade and conquer Spain. And you'll recall in our extensive discussions about how Jews were treated in the medieval period under Islam, that Jews would be categorized as dhimmis. Remember this? And a dhimmi is a protected person. So recall that Muhammad had said Jews and Christians, although he was a little more suspect about Christians, and some Zoroastrians were under the category of dhimmi, a protected people, meaning that they didn't say convert or die to the dhimmis. Why? Because dhimmis already had an established written tradition before Islam came about. And Muhammad designated clearly Jews and Christians ultimately, although, as I said, he had some suspicions about the saints and other things, as monotheistic religions. And as such, Muhammad said, okay, you can be part of our society. You don't get the same rights as we do as Muslims, but you can be part of the society, and we're not coming after you to convert you or do anything else.
Didn't he consider there were precursors to him as prophets like Abraham?
Yes, so that there were prophets among, there were Jewish prophets, and he also considered Jesus a prophet. But Islam for Muhammad was the latest revelation from God. So we had our revelation at Sinai. Then Christianity had a new testament, a new agreement brought by Jesus. And then Islam comes along and says, those two are out of favor. God has a newer agreement now, and it's called, and we're calling the religion Islam. Okay. So the Jews in 711 immediately became dhimmis. And there was a special tax that they had to pay called the jizya, Jizya, which was a tax for not serving in the military. They were taxed for not serving in the military, but they were also prohibited from serving in the military. So they had to pay a tax for something they couldn't do. They weren't allowed to do. But that's how it was. And you'll recall that as dhimmis, Jews existed more or less peacefully coexisted peacefully with Islam. There were riots here and there, but nothing like in Christian Europe. We coexisted for the most part as long as we behaved. Remember that we had restrictions. We couldn't build or repair synagogues. We couldn't be higher than a Muslim, meaning we couldn't ride a horse while a Muslim was walking. We had to wear special identification. And we couldn't be ostentatious. So, on our holidays, we couldn't, go out in the streets and parade around with the Torah and all these kinds of things. We just had to kind of keep a very low profile and behave ourselves. If we did that, which we did in most places, then we were kind of left alone. And we were treated okay. Fast forward now, very quickly, this was the problem when Jews first started entering Israel in the late 1800s, then Palestine, right? Because there were a small group of Jews in Jerusalem. They were very studious, pious men who were studying in Jerusalem. There were always Jews, even after the Islamic conquests of Israel, Palestine, Jerusalem. And as these waves of Jews began to come to Israel, it was called the Aliyot, right? And starting after 1881 in the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, all of a sudden, the Muslim majority said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're coming, what? You're going to rebuild a home? What? You're not, no, you're dhimmis. Behave like it. Well, these new settlers coming from Eastern Europe and Russia had no idea what a dhimmi was supposed to do. And all they knew is they were going to reestablish a homeland for Jews. And that was the beginning of a lot of hostilities because they weren't behaving like dhimmis. They were buying up land from the Arabs, and they were doing whatever they wanted. So the hostilities mounted, and as soon as that population threatened to become the majority population, that's when everything broke loose. And everything went to hell. Okay, so in 711, the Moors invade Spain, and they take over most of Spain. Spain at that time had two very large kingdoms. The kingdom of Aragon and the kingdom of Castile. All right. So the Moors come in and they take most of Spain. That's all Muslim now. And that begins what we call, and we've talked about it here and there in this class, but it's worth remembering because it's an important event in history. It's called the Reconquista. Reconquista in Spanish. And Reconquista is exactly what it sounds like, reconquest. And the reconquest of what? It's the reconquest of Spain by the Catholic monarchies to return Spain to Catholicism and get rid of Islam in Spain. And that began in 1492. And during the Reconquista, Jews were, because Jews knew Arabic, it made us very, very valuable. Thank you. So we were recruited both as spies and diplomats by the Christians to spy against and work with the Moors. In 1492, we have the fall of Granada, the last southern holdout of the Muslims, and the Palace of Alhambra. Who's been to Alhambra? Tell us about it, just a little bit. Alhambra is an incredibly beautiful palace of Moorish architecture in southern Spain.
The first thing I want to say is buy your tickets online with a reservation time, because that we were lucky and smart enough to do that, and we walked right in. If you were going to buy your tickets that day, it was a 2 to 2.5 hour wait. So anyone who wants to go there, it's a huge complex of different palaces and buildings, and it is one of the most outstanding places that I have ever been.
Very nice.
I mean that sincerely.
Would anyone else like to comment on Alhambra?
Joette isn't here.
Yeah. So Alhambra is just an incredible example of Moorish architecture, and it's a huge, just breathtaking palace in southern Spain. And that falls in 1492. And so then who are the rulers of Spain once Islam falls? It's Ferdinand and Isabella. Exactly. So Ferdinand and Isabella had gotten married in 1469. So approximately 23 years prior to the fall of Islam in 1492. What's important to understand about Ferdinand and Isabella is Ferdinand was from the kingdom, the heir to the kingdom of Aragon. Isabella was heir to the kingdom of Castile. And so their marriage united the two largest kingdoms in Spain, which was very, very important for us to understand. Their marriage united the country of Spain, basically. And so in 1487, we have the first printed book published in Portugal in Hebrew, and it's called the Faro Torah, the Faro Pentateuch, F-A-R-O. And it was published by Samuel Gasson, who had fled the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. Famous Jews at that time, in the late 1400s, we have Isaac Abravanel. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, as a rabbi, it means something to me because he's a very, very famous commentator. So we had, during rabbinical school, we had to look at his commentaries on the Torah and understand various things through his eyes. So remember that in our tradition, we have a number of different commentators on Torah and Talmud. And some of those names we should...
Could you repeat the name?
Sure. Isaac Abravanel. Abravanel. Perhaps the most important, most well-known commentator is Rashi. That's a name we should all know about. Rashi was a vintner, and he was a commentator on Torah and Talmud. And Rashi solves many problems for us in the Torah. There's a whole number of books about. It's called "What's Bothering Rashi," and many rabbis have these books. And you try to figure out. Okay, we have a problem in Torah. How does Rashi solve it for us? My favorite is, so when you recall, when Jacob has his dream, he has a dream, and what does he see? Right? Angels, are they going up first and coming down, or are they coming down and going up? Really? So what Rashi, they're going down and coming up. And Rashi says, wait a minute, going down and coming up, that doesn't make sense. They need to be going up and coming down. And so Rashi solves let me go back. Going up and coming down. Rashi says, why are they going up and coming down? Angels live up there. Why aren't they coming down and going up? That's what Rashi says. I had it confused for a second. Going up and coming down, you're right, Susie. And Rashi says that doesn't make any sense. Angels live up there. Why aren't they coming down and then going back up? And Rashi says this is very easy to figure out. The angels who are accompanying Jacob in his territory go to the border, because in those days it was our belief that every territory had its own angels that were protective of you as you were in that territory. So they get to the border. The angels who are protecting Jacob go up. They return. Who are the angels coming down? These are the new angels who are going to lead Jacob as he goes over the border in the new territory. Very elegant, beautiful. That's Rashi. Rashi was French. Yes. Okay, so the Faro Torah is 1487. It's the first book published in Portugal, and it's in Hebrew. And Abravanel is a commentator similar to Rashi. He solves, there are problems all throughout Torah. If you read it carefully, the question is like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Or why? There's no information here. These kinds of things. Lisbon and Evora were important Jewish communities at that time. You'll see I have them listed there. So after 1492, Alhambra, Spain, and most cities did not allow Jews to enter from Spain. In other words, if you were in Portugal, the Inquisition had not been brought there yet. Spain, in 1492, expels Jews, and then those Jews are trying to figure out a place to live. So many of them tried to go to Portugal because it was right next door and the languages were sort of kind of similar. And so they tried to go there, but Portugal did not allow them to enter from Spain. And in 1496, all the Jews in Portugal, as well as Muslims in Portugal, with the new king, had until October 1497. So from December 1496 to October 1497, approximately a year, a little less than a year, to be baptized or leave. Many Jews were expelled, and many Jews converted and integrated into society. You will, we'll leave it at that. Yes, many integrated into society. 1497, big year, because Vasco da Gama sets out. I think we all, in some point in our lives, have heard the name Vasco da Gama. And he was an explorer, very good. He was a Portuguese explorer. He circumnavigated the earth. Vasco da Gama, yes, very good, Cape of Good Hope, which allowed him a sea route to India. Rosalie, wow. You could teach the class for me. Wow, I'm impressed. Yeah, I don't even remember the 4th grade. So Vasco da Gama is a Portuguese explorer, and he discovers a sea route to India, which is south around the Cape of Good Hope. And he is the first one to be able to link Europe with Asia. That enabled European powers, especially the Portuguese, to establish colonial empires. They went to these countries and they took over.
So, Rabbi, because I did a So when I did the report on Vasco da Gama, when he reached Goa in India, who was there to greet him but Jews?
Yay. Yay. So at that time, his trip was the longest ocean voyage that had ever been made. And one of the principal, or two, I should say, of the principal rewards for him getting to India was the importation of pepper and cinnamon. You know, of course, it's hard for us to understand this because these are things that, I mean, we just go to the grocery store and get whatever we want. Spices were highly valuable at that time. So remember, in Europe, no one had ever tasted cinnamon. And it was like, wow, what is this? This is so great. And so they became valuable commodities. All right. In 1536, Portugal brings the Inquisition to the country. And of course, its primary job, the Inquisition, is to root out conversos. As we've spoken about many times, but it bears repeating every time, just so that we know for sure, the Inquisition didn't go after Jews. We were already heretics. We were just expelled. The Inquisition's job was to go after Christians who were not practicing Christianity exactly like the Pope wanted. So the Inquisition didn't go after Jews. It went after from our standpoint, it went after conversos. Why? Because these were Jews, these had been Jews who converted to Christianity and were always suspect that they didn't really convert in their hearts. And they weren't authentic, right? And we know for sure that some didn't. Some did. Some converted and they completely gave up their Judaism and they became Christians. That's true. And some didn't. Some tried to maintain their Jewishness and pretend that they were Christian. Those people usually were found out and, if convicted, burned at the stake. Burned at the stake. It was horrible. Absolutely. So the Portuguese Inquisition came in 1536, and then Portugal brought the Inquisition to its territories that it had conquered, namely Brazil, Cape Verde, and India. And what's interesting for us as Americans is that the colony in Recife, Brazil, had the Inquisition brought to it. Jews coming to America, the first Jews who come to America come from Recife in Brazil, fleeing the Inquisition that had been brought there. And they're the first ones who get to the Americas.
Is it known who they were, their family names or anything from?
The question is it known who they were, their family names, etc.? I think it is known. I think it is known. So where did Portuguese Jews go to flee the Inquisition after 1536? They went to India. Angola? Angola? I don't think Angola. They went to Antwerp. They went to Hamburg. You know what? So the question is, didn't they go to Angola? Didn't I tell you in our first class that they went to Angola? I don't remember, but I will look at that, because if I did, then I need to make sure of that. But the primary destination, good memory though, thank you. The primary destination for Portuguese Jews, primary destinations, were Hamburg, Germany, Antwerp, Belgium, and by far the largest, Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So you'll remember that Amsterdam at that time was called the Dutch Jerusalem because there were so many Portuguese Jews and Portuguese conversos. Eventually, also, Portuguese Jews made it to Thessalonica in Greece. That's why Thessalonica had a huge Greek population that was wiped out by the Nazis, absolutely wiped out. They went to Constantinople in Turkey, which is now, of course, Istanbul. They went to France. They went to Morocco. They went to Curacao. That's how we get our wonderful congregation in Curacao with the sand floor. And they spoke Ladino. So Ladino was very popular in these places. among the people who were part of the Portuguese move to these cities was, of course, Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza. Remember, we talked about Spinoza in an earlier class. Spinoza is a name we should absolutely know because he was one of the most original Jewish thinkers in Jewish history, one of the most original. Remember, he was put in Cherem by the Portuguese Sephardic Jewish community, and he remains in Cherem today, in excommunication, even today. It was never rescinded.
I looked him up again after your discussion about him, and not only was he rejected by the Jews, he was also rejected and isolated by the Christians there.
Thank you, Gary. So, remember I gave you one sentence to remember Spinoza's philosophy. What was that sentence? If you had to say, what was Spinoza's philosophy of God as it relates to us as Jews? Why did they put him in Cherem in one sentence? Good. Say it again. Nature. Nature what? God is nature. Nature is God.
And that didn't set him in good with the Christians.
That didn't set him in well with the Christians either. For us as Jews, remember, God is definitely not nature. When we look outside and we see the gorgeous trees in the meadow, that's not God. That is a creation of God. God sits above and outside nature, having created it. For Spinoza, nature was proof of God, and nature was God. And if you asked him what was God, well, just look outside. Nature all around you, that's God. And that branded him absolutely a heretic at his time because it conflicted completely with rabbinical Judaism. So that's Spinoza. God is nature, nature is God. All right. In the 19th century, so we're talking about the 1800s, some Jewish families returned to Portugal. They were allowed back. The Portuguese Inquisition ends in 1821. The Spanish Inquisition ends in 1834. So by the mid-1800s, Jews were allowed to go back. And we have the first new synagogue to be built after the Inquisition in Lisbon in 1904. During World War II, Portugal is neutral. And at the time, there were approximately 400 Jews. That's it, 400 Jews living in Portugal, as well as 650 refugees from Europe.
So one of the reasons why they were neutral.
Hang on.
One of the reasons why they were neutral during World War II was because they had a fascist government, just like Franco in Spain.
Very good, thank you. And so there were refugees from other countries in Europe, Germany and east of Germany, who went to Portugal to escape the Nazis. However, in order to remain neutral, Portugal had to be very, very careful. The governor at the time, Salazar, said that there were to be no visas issued to immigrant Jews, meaning that the Jews who are already there were fine, but we're not taking in any more Jews, because if we do, then we're not going to be seen as neutral anymore, and then we're going to get attacked. So no new visas. However, despite the prohibitions, there were rescue efforts everywhere through Lisbon. And it's not certain, but there were probably thousands maybe much more than that, maybe many more than that, Jews who escaped through Portugal, through Lisbon, to the U.S. or Palestine. So a couple of names which are really important. Aristides de Souza Mendes. He was a Portuguese consul in Paris. There is not agreement as to how many Jews he issued visas for through Lisbon, but he issued a number of visas to save Jews. And he was honored as the righteous, one of the righteous among the nations by Israel. There was also Carlos Garrido, who was the ambassador to Budapest, and also Carlos Branquinho, who was the charge d'affaires. And the two of them helped approximately 1,000 Jews escape from Hungary. Garrido was arrested by the Gestapo in 1944, and he was honored in 2010 as one of the righteous among the nations by Israel. Synagogues in Lisbon. There, in 1934, the establishment of the Ohel Jacob Synagogue, which was an Ashkenazic synagogue, and it was based on tolerance. It's the only Reform synagogue in Portugal, and it's in Lisbon. In 1923, we had the Porto Synagogue, which again was an Ashkenazic synagogue, and part of what made them kind of special is they took a real interest in trying to convert conversos back to Judaism. They took a real interest in taking in conversos and trying to teach them about being Jewish and reconverting them. And now there are over 500 members in the Porto Synagogue, and they have a Beit Din, they have kashrut established within the city. So remember what we talked about, just as an aside. Conversos, halachically, are Jewish because they were Jewish to begin with. Remember, I told you, you can't get out. Once you get into the tribe, once you're born into the tribe, or once you convert into the tribe, you cannot get out, halachically, under Jewish law. My opinion, as well as many other sort of modern rabbis, is that maybe halachically you can't get out, but if you have chosen another religion, then I'm sorry, you don't get the privileges that membership entails, right? Like the old commercial for American Express, membership has its privileges. It's the same thing for us. Being a Jew has privileges. We get to be called to the Torah. Many may not see that as a privilege, but it is in fact an honor. Conversos halachically are Jewish. Would they have to undergo a full conversion? Well, the question becomes then, if you are a descendant of a converso, and it was through your mother's line, and it's unbroken, then you're Jewish. What do you need for a conversion at that point? Number one, you have to, if you're a male, you have to be circumcised. You have to go to mikvah. And you should go before the Beit Din. But the requirements are less because you're already halachically Jewish. But yes, a descendant of a converso who knows nothing about Judaism should take an Intro to Judaism class, should go to mikvah, and the males should be circumcised, and then the conversion is very easy. There is a Jewish community in Belmonte in Lisbon, and that was established in 1989, and many of the members of that synagogue are descendants of conversos. And there's a community in, I think this is Cascais, Cascais. And that was established in 2019, and that's Chabad. That's Chabad. They're everywhere. And you know what? Good for them. Good for them. Good for them. They yes, Janice. Yes. Yes. Janice wants to take us back several centuries. Okay. Here. Wait.
One of my favorite persons to read about is, I have a book, Benjamin of Tudela. He is the Jewish Marco Polo. So Jews traveled all over and were traders because various towns were welcoming Jews because they could talk the language and do their trading. And this was a surprise to everybody here. Vasco da Gama went to Asia and he found all these Jewish traders. And that was how they were able to feel comfortable going there, because there was somebody who could speak their language.
Wonderful.
This is a true story.
Thank you, Janice. That's wonderful.
Right, when I said earlier that Vasco da Gama discovered the Jews there who welcomed him, and yes, Janice, you're right. And the Jews were traders, and they were part of the Silk Road. They went into India, and they were traders. And at least my research shows that the Jews had gone there after the fall of the temple, the destruction by the Romans, that they had gone to other parts of the world, and that's why. And Janice is right. They spoke the native language. And the Jews throughout the world, of course, spoke Hebrew, and they were able to communicate. Was it Hebrew or Aramaic? I wasn't sure.
So the Jews throughout the world were speaking various languages. They were speaking the same language to the other Jews. Jews could communicate to each other in certain ways in Hebrew. By that time, Hebrew had not been spoken for many hundreds of years. Remember that after the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom in 721, Hebrew begins to be replaced by Aramaic. And so certainly, in the late BCEs and early CE, Aramaic was the spoken language, the lingua franca of Jews. As we move through medieval time, then the languages branch out a little bit. The Sephardic Jews are speaking Ladino. The Ashkenazic Jews are speaking Yiddish. And the Jews who are living under Islam are speaking Arabic. So Jews could communicate with each other in basic Hebrew, like weights and measurements and things like that, which made them very, very valuable to trade between the Christian community and the Islamic community. They generally did not get along at all, so they used Jews to be the bridge for trade and communication.
Also in the Asian places where he found Jewish people with whom they could set up trades.
Right, and in the Asian countries where Vasco da Gama went, they found Jews with whom they could trade. Ken?
When I went to the Masada, our guide very proudly pointed to an inscription in Hebrew and was explaining that not one letter or character was different then from what it is now.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so let me just finish up. So in 2001, there were approximately 5,000 Jews in Portugal. 2006, approximately 8,000. But it's a deceiving number because many of those who were counted were conversos, some who had not converted back to Judaism yet. So somewhere in the low thousands, the community. But here's the really interesting point. As of today, 19.8, 20% of the Portuguese population has some degree of Jewish ancestry. That is incredible.
So we went to Portugal in 2014. We went to Portugal in 2014. We had this incredible guide, Michael, and I asked him to take us to as many Jewish sites as were possible on the itinerary. And he told me that he had Jewish blood. He had a genealogy test. And the thing that amazed me at the time, and you just verified it, he said about 20% of the people who are in Portugal have Jewish blood if they check their genealogy. 20%.
That's an astoundingly large number. 20%. That's huge. Okay, last two things. In 2013, Portugal enacted the law of return, where Portuguese citizens, if they could prove that they were Portuguese citizens during the expulsion, were allowed to come back and claim Portuguese citizenship. They didn't have to live in Portugal, but they could claim dual citizenship then. That was in 2013. In 2023, October 7, 2023, Hamas, of course, attacks Israel. And after October of 2023, vandals defaced the Porto synagogue, which we had talked about earlier, and there have been a number of anti-Semitic rallies and anti-Semitic hateful rhetoric among some Portuguese citizens, which we see everywhere, unfortunately. You know, Israeli politics, it's very complicated, and we all have, I would think, some kind of mixed feelings. My own personal view is that I support Israel's mission statement 100%. Get rid of Hamas, period. Annihilate Hamas. I support that 100%. But there's a lot of collateral damage. There's a lot of collateral damage. The destruction is not proportional, and so I feel, if we have to be honest about this, certainly before October 7th, many Palestinians did not support Hamas. They went along with it because they had to. Now, I would say the vast majority of Palestinians do support Hamas, and it has made things much worse. So I can say, for me personally, I absolutely support Israel's mission statement. I wish they would find a way to be more careful and protect innocent lives. So that it's a very, very, very difficult, very complicated situation, and I'm sure there's a whole lot of information that I don't know about and that we don't know about. Okay, final comments, and then we got to end class.
Yeah, that was the original plan.
That was the original plan. What was the original plan?
Doing what they did in Israel and getting that response was the original plan.
Doing what they did in Israel and getting that response was the original plan by Hamas, you said? Yes, yeah. For me, there must be a way that Israeli commandos, who are just the most advanced military contingent just about in the world, could seek out tunnels and destroy tunnels without having all that collateral damage of women and children and innocent men too. You know, these are.
Maybe that's not possible.
But maybe that's not possible.
You don't really know that.
I do not know that, and as Gary points out, that may not be possible. So, as I said, there's probably an enormous amount of information that I'm not privy to, but I just wish Israel could find a different way, could.
How would anyone know what Hamas's original plans were?
How would anyone know what Hamas's original plans are?
Original plans. How would we?
I read a lot, and I watch a lot of programs, and I hear very bright people. Hamas had no idea of the consequences of their actions, despite what
So Gary said in his experience watching commentators that Hamas had no idea of what they had started and what was going to be the aftermath of their initial attack.
And the last thing I want to say is, we still don't have any idea how this is going to all play
We
out.
still don't have any idea about how this is going to play out. That's absolutely
And
correct.
experts all agree on that one.
Yep. Okay, everyone, have a beautiful week. Hopefully, I'll see some of you on Sunday at the show. Bye.
I'm really sorry I can't come Sunday. A bunch of us are going to another play.
No problem.
And
No problem.
Counselor.
Sure.
And I watched a program, Israel in Crisis, a couple of days ago. Renowned experts. And they said something which I never really thought about. You will never totally be able to destroy Hamas. It's impossible. They have such a network worldwide.
I think that's true.
They will always be there as terrorists, but you can destroy their control of the government and their ability to
Yes.
carry out another
I
attack
agree.
like, huh?
I agree.
I never thought of that, but, you know.
Is that in April? April 2nd or something? What's that? No, is it April 2nd? It's okay, I can find that. I'll let people know. Yeah, it's a Tuesday, April 2nd, yeah. And it's the anti-Semitism book? Good. Okay, good.
Hi, I wasn't here last week. Are there any extra lessons?
Well, you failed the class.
It's a good thing
Yeah.
you're not grading.
It's a good thing. I'm going to do a review and then you
Oh,
made
okay.
a chart.
Okay, great.
So,
All
okay.
right, then I will just be paying extra attention.
Okay. I don't know. It's okay. I don't know how to. I'm not sure how to. It just pops up that way. I don't think so. I think today's her day off.
She mentioned last night about the hats.
Okay. All right. So hello everybody. Hope everyone's well. 2 volunteers to help pass out. So there's two packets. There's the source sheet, and then I made a little chart so we could review it together. So here's the chart, and Bridget, here's the source sheet. So make sure you have one of each. All right.
Very nice, man. It's so big. Can we have an art class?
All right. Okay, so it's good to see everybody here. And we're going to begin with the bracha for study, the blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And may these words of Torah be inspiring and thought-provoking and helpful. And let us all say, Amen. Okay, we began with last week, we got halfway through a Mishnah that talked about actually, does anyone want to offer, yeah, you can just throw them down here. Oh, okay. Does anyone want to offer? We were talking about a certain rabbi, Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, and his practices with the Beit Midrash. What's a Beit Midrash? A house of study. A house of study, like the word, like drop Midrash, Darshan, they all come from the same Hebrew root, which is sort of like you're taking the text and you're playing with it, you're interpreting it, you're extrapolating from it, you're reading things into it. A Beit Midrash is a house of study. And we talked about the importance of a house of study in the transition of Judaism from a temple-based religion to a knowledge-based religion. and a physically set-based religion, i.e. the temple, right? Where Judaism could be expressed at the temple, but after the destruction of the second temple, that wasn't possible anymore. And so the Beit Midrash becomes the gathering place of Jews, that and the Beit Knesset. Now, of course, there are Beit Knesset that are older than the second temple, that are contemporaneous to the second temple, but we're actually not sure what we did there. Like, did Jews pray in old Beit Knesset, in old synagogues? It's not clear. But prayer emerges. Several things emerge after the destruction of the second temple. First of all, no more sacrifices, and then yes to a more prominent role of B'tei Midrash, study halls, and also B'tei Knesset, synagogues. And synagogues, while we may not be certain what they did beforehand, maybe there was prayer, but prayer takes off as an institution as well in place of sacrifice. And also study takes over as a new way, a new kind of ethos that kind of drives Jewish life. Any questions about that? Anything that I just asked? So we define what a Beit Midrash is, what a Beit Knesset is, about the historical significance of a Beit Midrash and a Beit Knesset after the destruction of the second temple. And it all parenthetically goes to show that we are always an evolving religion. Go ahead, what's your question?
Where were these B'tei Knesset that were contemporaneous with the temple?
Where were these B'tei Knesset that were contemporaneous? In the Galilee, for instance? There's many B'tei Knesset. I had the pleasure when I was a rabbinical student of going with Lee Levine, who is a world-leading archaeologist of Second Temple period, on like a whole tour through ancient synagogues in the Galilee. And so there's in the Galilee there's a number. Here, you've been to Masada, many of you. Masada, at the top of Masada, there's a Beit Knesset. Masada is built it's built as Herod's palace. It becomes a refuge for the zealots when they bolt out of Jerusalem, and then becomes their last standing. But there's a Beit Knesset at the top of Masada. So what were they doing there? We're not sure. Maybe they were reading the Torah there, and just reading the Torah. Maybe it was like a JCC. Right? It's not clear that they ever prayed there. It's not clear that they didn't. But prayer, what is certain, this is what is certain. Before the destruction of the second temple, when people thought of Jewish practice, they thought of sacrifices and they thought of the temple. After the destruction of the second temple, when people think about Jewish practice, they think about prayer, they think about synagogues, and they think about study halls. And so you see an enormous, not only a shift that doesn't do quite, that doesn't justify, that term doesn't justify what happened. You see a revolution. The Judaism of rabbinic literature, which emerges again after the destruction of the second temple, which is the product of what is discussed at these study halls. It is not the same religion as the religion of the Bible. And it's not the same religion as what those people were practicing at the time of the second temple. Maybe there were seeds of it that were beginning to develop, but those seeds only blossom in the vacuum that's created after the destruction of the second temple. So our ability to recreate ourselves after a cataclysmic event, that saved Judaism. You could offer that we've done that several times. If you think recently, not recently in terms of our lifespan, but recently in terms of history, you think about European Jewry and their powerlessness, and then you think about the birth of Zionism and then the founding of Israel and the assertion of Jewish power and sovereignty. Right? Like the Jews of Eastern Europe have no power and therefore are objects in the historical narrative as opposed to Jews now. I mean, wherever you fall on Israel and the current events and the hostages and all of this, what can't be argued is that Israel is a player on the world stage with power and influence, and they are not, Jews aren't just objects anymore, and that's changed. You had a question, Ken? Here, I'll repeat it. You want to get up? You want to stand up and?
It was explained to me when I was in Hebrew school that the knowledge of how the old religion practiced their religion died at the Masada. That all the people that really knew how to do it were killed at the Masada.
So Ken said it was taught to him in Hebrew school that the old religion was killed at Masada. Yeah, and the death of the people. I hate to be. I don't want to do this to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think that's true.
Think about how long ago he was.
That's right. When you were. Maybe, how about this? Your teacher was right, but you're just misremembering it. I wouldn't say that at all. I'd say that the people who went up at Masada, I'd say just the opposite. Yeah. So I'd say the folks that went up Masada, now you take by the way, Masada's kind of fallen off. Masada used to be like one of the top 10 places. Like, how many of you went to, did a family trip or something like that, a mission to Israel? Raise your hand if you've been to Israel, right? Keep your hand up. How many of you went to Masada? All of you, right? Like the Israel 101 first-timer trips, you all go to Masada, right? And they used to have the army dedication at Masada because that was 30, 40 years ago. The idea that these people stood on this hill and they died to be Jewish, well, that has truth to it, and it's a little more complicated. They were Meshugana. They were the zealots, and they were probably the same zealots who helped with the destruction of the Second Temple because they were more moderates. The Romans surround Jerusalem because there's a rebellion. And there are more moderates in the city who are saying, we shouldn't be rebelling against the Romans. We should figure this out with them. And then the zealots actually make that impossible. And so it's almost like a Jewish civil war that's going on as the Romans are outside of the city. Those same zealots who then actually burn all of the foodstuffs of the entire city in order to force the Jewish community into a war with the Romans, because now they need to leave the city to get food. Those are the same folks who end up on the top of Masada. They're the zealots. The people who preserve the tradition are not those people. The tradition is preserved by a man named Yochanan ben Zakkai, who gets snuck. He's snuck out in a coffin outside of the city, and when he's snuck out into the coffin, he meets the Roman emperor, and who he knows, and it's a long story, we're not going to get into it, but he says, maybe we'll study it here, and he says essentially the Roman emperor realizes that he's in the presence of a great scholar and a mensch of a guy, and did him a few favors. So he says, oh, what can I do for you, Yochanan ben Zakkai? And Yochanan ben Zakkai replies and says, essentially, I know this is a lost cause, meaning Jerusalem. just give me Yavna. It's the little town of Yavna on the coast, which is where Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he says, and give me the sages. And then Yochanan ben Zakkai builds a school. One of the students, and so that shows the transition. The folks on Masada, they're right, they were ready to die for the way it was, but they weren't the preservers. The ways of what was were preserved, but not by those folks, because they all died. So they did die, but they weren't but the knowledge didn't die with them, because if you look in the Talmud, there's like explications of how to do all the sacrifices and how to do this and how to do that, and if the temple was brought back, there's a pretty good instruction manual in rabbinic literature about what to do. And that's preserved by the moderates, folks like Yochanan ben Zakkai, who were able to preserve Judaism despite all of that. And one of Yochanan ben Zakkai's students is Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, who is the scholar of our Mishnah that we were studying. How about that for a transition? Right? Okay. So getting back to Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana. Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana used to pray as he entered the Beit Midrash, and as he left it, he used to pray a short prayer. I'm on the first source, Mishnah Brachot 4:2 in the middle of the page. We did this last week, but we'll review. Okay. So the Mishnah is telling us that he used to pray a short prayer when he came and when he left. Now, the Mishnah is trying to teach us a new culture for how to behave in the Beit Midrash. It's a new institution. So we need to understand, how do we act in this institution? What are the cultural norms that we should be adopting? How do we want a Beit Midrash to look, essentially? And there's going to be two different versions of what a Beit Midrash is going to look like, which I began to show you last week. So the Mishnah, which is the earliest rabbinic teaching, says, okay, he used to enter and he used to leave, and before each of those times, before he went in, before he left, he said a short prayer, a tefillah katsara. They said to him, what is the reason for the prayer? Ma makom letefillah zo. And it could be like, what's the reason? What's the place? What's the appropriateness? Or like, what's going on with it? Amar lehem, he says to them, B'knisati, when I enter, ani mipalel, I pray, shelo te'era takala al yedi. When I enter, I pray that no mishap should occur through me. Uviyitziati, and when I leave, ani noten hodaya, I give thanks, I say todah al chelki, on my portion. Now, those are the highlights of what he says. That's not a quote. Those are the headlines of what he says. He says, when I get there, I pray that nothing bad should happen because of me. And when I leave, I give thanks to God for my portion. The two Talmuds that emerge, the Bavli from Babylon and the Yerushalmi in Jerusalem, which one is the more popular one? The Babylonian Talmud. Most of rabbinic literature emerges from diaspora, not from the land of Israel. The Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud both ask the same question. I kind of charted this out for you. What's going on with this prayer? We want to know. It's like what Ken was saying before. Tell us what happened. Like, what prayer did he say? What were his words? Not just like the headlines, not just the theme, but like how to do it. So tell us what he said. And the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud then imagine what he said, and what they come up with is very different. Or on the face of it, many similarities, but when you think about it, very different and very telling about two different cultures that are emerging in Jewish society, the Babylonian culture and the Yerushalmi culture. Everyone good so far? Okay, so let's go to the second page. Flip over. This is in the source sheet. So in the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, in this, you can read along with this. You could. This is the entrance prayer as understood by the Babylonian Talmud. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, B'knisato mahu omer, when he entered, what would he say? He used to, then it quotes, Yi ratzon mifanacha Hashem Elokei shelo ye'era devar takala al yadi. That I pray, what does he say? May it be your will, the Lord my God, that no mishap transpires by me. Velo ekashel bidvar halacha. And that I do not fail in the matter of halacha. In other words, making a legal ruling. V'yismechu bi chaverai, that causes my friends to have joy in me, in that. In other words, I'm getting up there and I say something. I don't make a mistake. And why is he afraid of making a mistake? Because he's going to get laughed at. It's not, he doesn't say, oh, I'm going to make a mistake. And, you know, I gave you that example when I got up as my first year of a rabbi last week, and I gave a whole speech, and everyone liked it. Everyone, very nice speech. And the senior rabbi leaned over to me and goes, it was a good speech, but it was all wrong. Oh, thank you. So it's not, he's not concerned, at least the Babylonian Talmud doesn't imagine his motivating fear of making a mistake is he doesn't want to be embarrassed. Public humiliation. Right? We all have nightmares about that, right? Like you show up in your underwear to take an exam, or like everyone has that. Doesn't everyone have that dream? Right? Not that bad? Okay. Okay. All right. Then it goes on. Velo omar al tameh tahor, that I will not declare something that's impure, I won't call it pure. Velo al tahor tameh, and I will not declare something that is pure impure. Velo yikashlu chaverai bidvar halacha, and my colleagues won't. Then this is interesting that velo yikashlu chaverai bidvar halacha, and my colleagues won't mess up in a matter of law. Ve'esmach behem. And I'll laugh at them. I'll have joy, as simcha. I'll have joy, be sameach, with that. In other words, the central motivating fear, according to the Bavli, which looks at the Remember, the Talmud takes the Mishnah and kind of explodes it with discussion. When the Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, looks at the Mishnah and says, let's imagine what his words are, they imagine a guy who walks into the study hall with fear that he's going to say something stupid and get laughed at, or fear that someone else is going to say something stupid and he's going to laugh at them. Imagine that. That's the motivating concern here. His whole prayer is out of fear of embarrassment, either his embarrassment or that he will derive pleasure from his colleagues' embarrassment. And that's the motivation for his prayer. And then you got to wonder What kind of culture could imagine that that's his prayer? Because that ain't his prayer in the Mishnah. What's his prayer when he entered it? Like it says here, I pray that I won't make a mistake. That's the headline. But the way the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud imagines it is, I pray that I won't make a mistake because people are going to laugh at me and I'm going to look like an imbecile. And I also hope my colleagues don't make mistakes because I'm going to laugh at them and then I'm going to be a jerk. So you got to wonder, what kind of society imagines that that's the prayer? This is the Babylonian Talmud imagining what this prayer was. What kind of society would imagine that? What do you think? Teenagers? Okay, why are they teenagers? It's good. Yeah. Good. So Nadia says, no, maybe these are teenagers, because teenagers, I'm going to extrapolate a little bit what you said. Teenagers aren't particularly secure in their identity, and their identity is just rooting. So they're not, like, they laugh at one another, they make fun of one another, they're often cruel to one another, they're always afraid of saying something that will, then that turn, they're afraid of saying something that someone else will think is, like, silly. So that's a good, like, maybe it's teenagers that he's teaching in a study hall of teenagers. But he's not. They're not teenagers, but maybe they're acting like teenagers. Anyone else? What kind of society is it? Melinda?
Well, they just want to give everybody the respect that they deserve as human beings.
So he's, but what? The teacher only needs to stand up and say, don't mock somebody if kids have already been mocked. You don't need to pray for something bad not to happen if you couldn't imagine that bad thing ever happening. So they must be thinking that this stuff, or does happen, that this is, yeah, Sharon, you want to say something? Very much so. It's a judgmental Beit Midrash. Right. Right. You're all looking for that mistake. It's cutthroat. It's, I'm getting joy, Schadenfreude, at maybe not laughing, because that's not, the Yismechu can be, it doesn't necessarily need to be like outward joy, but I'm like, they screwed up. Right? Like, I think everyone would agree after the State of the Union that the senator who gave that speech. All right, forget about the content. Forget about the content, but I got to imagine that people who agree with her content, we're not getting into like the particulars of her content, but the people who agree with her content, who also are hoping to be vice president on the Republican, were kind of like, ha ha. Like laughing, boy, you look like an idiot, right? Like, she really embarrassed herself. Cross her name off the list. Like, she's done. Like, she's roasted. That seems like it's a Babylonian Talmud approach. The Babylonian Talmud seems like a high-pressured kind of society. And actually, that is true. Because it was, now we have universal education. Let's just say that these were like Babylonian yeshivot or B'tei Midrash were, they were like you'd send a child away, or you'd send a student, a person away, and it was more like a full-time occupation. Because they were boarding there, so it was the creme de la creme, and it felt like it wasn't collegial, It wasn't collaborative, but it was confrontational. And so you can see in it that in the Babylonian B'tei Midrash, a kind of an air of fear and competition and joy when others mess up. Okay. Yes. You can certainly say that. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, they weren't I'm just repeating. They weren't collegial with themselves either. It seems like it was dog eat dog. Right. So you sit in the Beit Midrash, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's student, Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, walks in, and his only hope when he walks in, he makes a prayer is, I hope I don't make a mistake so they don't laugh at me, and I hope I don't have joy from other people making mistakes. That kind of approach sort of lets you know what's animating the environment there. So Rosalie's saying this is not a good environment, and maybe there's something to be said about that. Maybe it's not, right? Okay, that you have to be careful that you can create competitive but not antagonistic, or can you have competitive where each person is driven to be their own? I mean, if you look at modern studies in education, I can even just look at now, like my children's schooling compared to my own. There's much more emphasis on, often projects will have dimensions of collaboration. That in the past, I like once in a while, I like experienced that in school, once a year maybe, but now it's often they are evaluated on group work. Because educational theorists say that's the real world. You have to work with other people. The very few jobs do you work in a complete vacuum, or in complete solitude. You are engaged with other people, and so you need to learn how to collaborate. And you need to know how to overcome difficulties and overcome challenges. And my son in high school, and there's different ways of doing it, said, he's working with one kid, and the kid, he's friends with him, and he felt badly because the kid's not doing so great. And he was like, okay, so I reminded him 3 times to do it, and then I just did it. And okay, like that's one way of dealing with it. Maybe it was the right way in that situation. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But to deal with that real world tension of what my partner's not pulling their weight, what do I do? It seems like in the Babylonian Beit Midrash, it was a dog-eat-dog world. Okay, in the Babylonian imagination of what he says on the way out, what is Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana's prayer on the way out? B'yitziato mahu omer. When he leaves, so I'm on the Hebrew's on the bottom of the second page, the English is on the top. So upon his exit, what did he say? I give thanks before you, Lord my God, that you have placed my lot among those who sit in the study hall, and that you have not given me my portion amongst those who sit idly on corners, on street corners. I rise early and they rise early. I rise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they rise early to pursue frivolous matters. I toil and they toil. I toil and receive a reward. They toil and do not receive a reward. I run and they run. I run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction. What a jerk! What a jerk. So, he is All right, fill in the blank. He is a jerk. He's arrogant. Arrogant.
Well, there's only one way, and it's his way.
One way or the highway, it's his way. He's judgmental, right? He looks at those. He walks out of the Beit Midrash, and he looks on over. Yes, I rise early and they rise early, but I rise early for Torah study and they for frivolous matters like going to work and feeding your family, you know. I toil and they toil. I study all day and I receive a reward. And by that, it's kind of like a play on the word because it's not financial reward. By the way, remember last time we talked, he was actually very wealthy. I receive a reward. And they don't receive a reward. Yeah, but they're like going to work, right? They're like, you know, fixing stuff and plowing and doing things, growing crops. I run and they run. I run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the Be'er Shachat, the Be'er, the well of destruction or waste. He is judgmental. By the way, it's interesting because this is not congruous with his person. Again, this is the Babylonian Talmud imagining what he used to say word for word. The headline that we got for him to say when he was asked directly, what do you say? He said, B'yitziati, when I leave, ani noten hodaya, I give thanks al chelki. I give thanks for my portion. There's no indication that's the headline. The quote that he gives is, I give thanks to my portion. Then when the Babylonian Talmud tries to imagine what does that really mean, what are the actual words, you get like this judgmental, you know, I am all that, they are all yuck. Like you get this very judgmental. It doesn't seem to be the case that that's actually, is that consistent with the headline? I don't think so either. It's almost like not, I give thanks to by the way, chelki could be two things. He could be saying, I give thanks to my portion, like, I'm wealthy and I could afford to be here, and I'm thanking God I have the opportunity to do that. That could be a translation of it. It could be, I'm glad that I get to do this holy work, that I get to see holy matters. But in no way does the headline, does the Mishnah, does it like have such judgmentalism about other people? About, those street dwellers, those worker people. What's that? I don't remember where his wealth comes from. Maybe Wall Street. No, I don't. I just don't remember. I don't remember. Yeah. By the way, it's not him putting down people that are working. It's the Babylonian Talmud trying to imagine what he said. And in their imagination, you see, now that fits, one second, Nadia, very much so with the culture that we were talking about of a culture inside the Beit Midrash, which was dog eat dog. And so then you walk out and you look at the rest of the world and you're like, you know. So like you can see like someone who goes into a very combative Beit Midrash that demands excellence and encourages put downs, and when you walk out of that Beit Midrash and now you're face to face with completely a society that is not practicing that, then of course you're judgmental towards it. Okay, Nadia and then Ken. What's that? Oh, you see it differently? Great.
I see it as a source for the life philosophy of ultra-Orthodox communities where the men go to study and family support them and their wife
Right. Good. Nadia actually took it and brought it to today. She says, I see the roots of what is happening in ultra-Orthodox circles where men are encouraged to dedicate their lives to study and don't work. By the way, I thought you were going to go slightly different. I thought you were going to say in ultra-Orthodox circles in Israel, when men do not sign up for the army and you have 300,000 plus men and women defending the country while they're studying in the yeshiva. And boy, has that become a source of tension. Like my son, and their response is, what we are doing is spiritually more important. We are saving the soul of Israel through our study, and they believe it. Like I talk to people, they believe it. And they'd get up here in front of you and they'd say, no, like that is, God will only save us because of this, because you're toiling, you defenders of the border of Gaza and people who are rooting out Hamas. But you're toiling for no reward. I toil for reward. You know, you're running for no purpose, but I'm running, like waking up and going into Gaza City to, prevent terrorist attacks. Like you see the roots of it. Yes, you absolutely do. Okay. Ken, and then Susie, and then Eileen. Oh, you don't want to say it?
Two things. One can't really survive without the other. And the other thing is right now among the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, a lot of their youth are joining the army to the absolute consternation of their elders.
Okay, so one cannot survive without the other. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understood that.
You need the intellectual people doing intellectual things because product comes from that.
Yes.
But you also need the defenders and the people that build and everything.
Absolutely.
In order to have a
Right. So Ken points out and says, but you're taking me on, which is good. So I'm going to come back at you a little bit, okay? So Ken says, but Rabbi, you're wrong, Rabbi. No, but he's making a serious point here. He's saying you need both. Rabbi, you need to have the intellectual, the academy that's preserved and that's where the tradition will continue to live and grow and take shape and be preserved. And you're right. But I would say to that is that you can make an argument for that, but not universal exemption from the army. And so a society that's fighting for universal exemption from the army, which they are, is saying something very different. When like the average student is the average student, is it better spent their efforts in the Beit Midrash studying or defending the country? So and you don't get a chance to argue that, because Ben Gurion, when he makes the deal with the ultra-Orthodox, he gives draft deferments and money. He's the one who initiates this whole thing. But he never thought it was going to grow the way it grew. And so, he did it. He was motivated. He was a political animal, David Ben Gurion. But he did it in order to keep the ultra-Orthodox with him in governing coalitions. But it came at a very high price now. So I would say I counter your points, Ken, by just saying the sheer number. And I'll refer back to my own experiences in yeshiva. You'd sit at yeshiva, but then there would be the office would get notice that the government was coming the next day. So the Beit Midrash would be reasonably full. But then when you heard that the government was coming the next day to take a survey of how many students were there, and based on that attendance, that's how money would be appropriated. You came the next day, the place is packed. Packed to the gills. people you never saw before. They're all jammed on in there. And so what's happened is that I fear that it's no longer just you're right, like all people shouldn't do all things, and that there is a place for the preservation of Torah study. I mean, I'm a rabbi, but I think that it's gotten ridiculous. And then the second point that you made, which is that I think you said lots of ultra-Orthodox are signing up for the army to their parents' consternation or family. And I would say many, there are a lot more that are, but statistically not even close. And they are signing up where they volunteer to do it, as opposed to, the kid in B'nai Brak can choose to sign up or not. The child in Tel Aviv has no choice. And that seems completely unfair, and that is ripping Israeli society, tearing at Israeli society right now. And I would say that, and even statistically, it's not irrelevant. Each child that makes that decision should be, I think, is a hero, right, for joining the army. And I think the army also can do a better job of making the army suitable for ultra-Orthodox, right? Like, you have to be sensitive to their religious practices and their different customs. Like, you can't, you have a kid who's growing up in B'nai Brak, and all of a sudden he's going to, be in an army with, Avital from Tel Aviv and wearing the bikini and, getting tattoos. That's a little bit, you have to be culturally sensitive to them. And I don't think the army always has, but I think that their insistence on universal exemptions is just wrong, right? And I think it's tearing the society, and it's a tear at the society currently, for sure. Okay. Who else had their hand up? Yes, Susie, go ahead.
I read somewhere that Rabbi Yochanan, grandfather, was the high priest, and he was a very kind, very knowledgeable, and so this just doesn't match with his characteristic.
Right. So this is not Rabbi Yochanan. This is Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, who's one of Rabbi Yochanan's students, and I don't think this is him. Again, I think what we have from him is just the headline of what his prayer is, which is, he says, and this is a direct quote, he said to them, in other words, they asked him, Ma makom letefillah zo? This is on the first page, the Mishnah. What's going on with your prayer? And he goes, B'knisati, when I come in, ani mipalel shelo te'era takala al yadi. I pray that that there's not a mistake happening because of me. Ubiyitziati, when I leave, ani noten hodaya al chelki. When I leave, I give a thanks that for my portion. That is not a jerk. That is not, I'm saying the way the Babylonian Talmud imagines and tries to elaborate on what he said, that, by the way, it's historiography. It's by looking at what they wrote, you could see a lot about who they were, not who he was. It's their imagination of him that's jerky, but not him that's a jerk. Does that make sense? Okay, so what we're going to do now is pause, and you're welcome, thank you. And we are going to then, next time, look at how the Jerusalem Talmud looks at the same headline from this rabbi and what the different similarities and differences are. So keep your, this will help us next time, you can just give them all to me and I'll hold them for you. Okay, so make a pile here, the two different, just keep them separately, it's okay. All right, so come put them up here, and I hope everyone has a nice day. And when you go out and see the people toiling for no reward in pits of destruction, just remember that we are the ones who are serving God. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, do you? Oh. Oh, where was that? Oh, where was that? Oh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a scholar. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for sharing that.
I did it on Monday.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. He's a nice man.
He is a nice person.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. The rumor is that they wanted him to be the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, but he wouldn't leave Israel. Yeah. 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 Okay. Thanks, Janice. Good to see you. Have a good day. Oh. Have a good day, everyone. Have a good day. Be nice to them. I will be. Just point them out so we can be extra nice to them. They're always nice, I know. Yeah. No, well, we point them so we can be extra nice. Give him a call. Because I want to sit down and talk to him. Do you want to give him a call? Yeah. I know. I'd be happy to talk to you.
But are you free later? What's your schedule?
We can make this happen.
have a meeting now, I have a meeting at 1, I have a meeting at 2, I have a meeting at 3, I have a meeting at 3:30. And then I have to go to my kid's school at 5. So I can meet with you on, tomorrow's my day off, so I can't meet that.
Friday I can, I'm gonna be at USC until the afternoon. Are you here Friday?
I am here on Friday. I could meet with you on Friday I can meet with you from 10 to 10:30.
I'm at USC in the afternoon, I guess.
I am available at, I have a meeting at, I can meet at from 4 to 4:30 on Friday.
Okay,
Yeah?
yeah, put me down. If
Okay.
I can't, I'll let you know.
Sure.
Because I'll be at USC.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna meet.
Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
I know what Lauren's gonna tell me.
Well, I'm happy to fill in some more details. Or you can speak to him and then speak to me.